just tell me what it's like to be back up and running. You must have been looking forward to it. It must have been a long time coming.
Yeah, it was. Frustrating few months. But yeah, thankfully over the end of it now and back up and running. I actually had a couple of games under my belt the last couple of weeks, and hopefully a few more to come. Obviously, it's a good time, to come back, given there's obviously a lot of lads in camp, etc. So there's obviously a few more opportunities floating around. Easier to pick up game time and get some consistent games under the belt. So delighted to be back and almost feeling a part of the group again, which is nice.
When you immediately come back, are you part of the leadership group just due to your experience? And would you be a talker for all those young lads? Would that be part of your personality to be chatting away to these guys all the time? Or is there extra responsibility on you with the other lads away in camp?
There probably is, yeah. I mean, there's obviously more onus on older lads to speak up a bit more, but personality wise, I probably wouldn't be the loudest in the room. I'd definitely be vocal on the pitch, which is probably where I do most of my talking. Especially for young lads, there's obviously given where we are at the time in the season, there's obviously a lot of young lads making debuts. So if there's young guys coming into the squad or getting their first caps or first games, so talking to them and training in games and making them feel as comfortable as possible. Obviously, everyone knows what it's like to make their debut, or even to come into Leinster setup when you're training with a lot of lads you don't know or you haven't met before. So it's always a nervy time for anyone. So trying to make lads feel as comfortable as possible. And giving them plenty of chat on the pitch in particular.
Is there anyone in particular that you've noticed, any of the young lads who are kind of growing into leadership roles, who are more chatty, that you mightn't have expected it of them, or lads who have more time to talk because just with the other lads being away? Like said, Jamie's come in. He was, obviously he's a quiet guy, but he's definitely found his voice a bit more as the weeks have gone on. I think the coaches and Stuart and Leo and Phil in particular, they always put a lot of onus on young guys to not be afraid to speak up and to find their voice, as Stu would often say a lot in meetings and on the pitch. So the coaches place a lot of pressure on young lads in particular to speak, because even in meetings and a lot of the more senior guys and will go off to camp, and there's obviously not as many lads who are talking. So that the coaches always make sure that lads are finding their voice, which is really positive. How do you view the Six Nations? What prism do you look at it through? Is there a kind of a yearning there? Is it as a fan or a supporter, or what way do you watch it?
As a supporter, really. Obviously haven't been involved in the last while, but you still want, they're still your teammates, and there's obviously a big Leinster contingency in there. So I'm like any other person in the country, really. We want to see them succeed, and especially if it is my teammates, and seeing them do well and seeing them succeed it can only be a positive for us as a club too. You've got lads, and like I said, big contingency of lads coming back in, to train after Six Nations. If they're coming in confident and hopefully with a medal or a trophy with them too, they bring that back into Leinster as well, and especially for those lads coming back into some big games and back-to-back European games. It's always great if they're coming in, the confidence is high.
Can you just tell me a little bit about Will Connors? It was 8 to 10 weeks, and now obviously the news that it'll be the rest of the season. Was it something that happened since, or was something more visible that popped up on a review?
Pretty much that. It was we weren't sure until we went to see the specialist, and the specialist obviously had an investigation and found out a little bit of loose cartilage and various other things need tightening up, and if not, it was going to be a consistently reoccurring injury. So better get it done now and get him sorted so that he could have a good crack at pre-season and into into next season. So hugely frustrating for him. He's worked so hard and been so diligent in his rehab, but it's a setback. But he's a very upbeat guy. I spoke to him today. And he's my new assistant defence coach anyway, so he'll be made good use of.
Very good. Just to ask you about the match at the weekend, the try that you guys conceded, obviously you want to hold out for the whole match, but do you think that you probably won't concede another try like that all season, and that if you were telling lads 100 times it's not as effective as conceding in a match that you went on to win? Is it valuable in that way?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to concede any, and certainly not a soft one like that. I didn't think they'd really threatened us, and we'd spoken all week about the threat of Rhys Webb around the ruck, and he made 2 line breaks, one of which resulted in a try. So pretty frustrating from my point of view, and it's a good lesson, obviously for Ryan in particular. That fundamental of setting the ruck first, but. Overall, I was delighted with the performance. Although we didn't nail the clinical stuff in the red zone, I thought our build-up play a lot of the time was excellent. And this is a group of players that haven't played so much together, or they've had a long period in that COVID break, and obviously post that we had the European games. A lot of these lads hadn't played for a long time, so I still felt we were finding our feet a bit. I felt we were better than we were the previous week, and obviously we want to take it up a level this week against the Lions.
Finally, just about the Lions this week, I saw the highlights of their game, their last game out. What did you make of that? Do you do a full assessment of that game? Like, do you watch it a couple of times with the team or do you spend a lot of time on their weaknesses, or is it more about just getting your own game right? It's
a bit of both, really. I mean, we definitely spend a lot of time on ourselves and making sure we've got our preparation right, because we know if we get that right, we're going to be a hard team to beat. But when you've not played a team before as much, we've played a lot, obviously the Welsh and the Irish and the provinces, you know them pretty well, but this team we've not played before, so we went back and looked, and particularly at the results of those games right at the start of the season. When they came on that Northern Hemisphere tour, they just lost against Glasgow. It was a relatively close game against Ulster. They beat Zebra and lost against Scarlet, so they've not had a huge number of wins so far, but they're probably the most adept at coming to the Northern Hemisphere because of the size and power of their pack, really. They play a very direct game, very good set piece, good maul, typical South African team. So if any team's going to be ready to come up and play Northern Hemisphere rugby in February, then it's the Lions. So, and as you know, they've got a huge history, and we need to be very respectful of everything they bring this weekend, and we need to play well. And we've got 2 away games to come against Treviso and then against Ulster, so it's a great block for us, because originally, remember, the Six Nations was only going to have 2 games in us for us, but because of the cancellation, we've ended up playing this run of games now, which has been brilliant for young players and brilliant for the fringe players who needed to prove a point.
Just when you're talking there about James Lowe and Mac Hansen, they're obviously guys who didn't learn their rugby in Ireland. How important is it for a team to have people who kind of think about the game differently, just through not being conditioned, schools, academy, province? How important is that to a team, lads who are just not thinking the same as everyone else?
Yeah, no, I think diversity of opinion and personality is really important in a team. So I think it exists, but in coaching teams as well. One of the advantages here at Leinster is we've got obviously myself from England, Robin from Wales, Felipe from Argentina, and Leo from Ireland, and that sort of diversity definitely helps. And having different personalities in the group as well. So you definitely don't want everyone to think and act the same way. That said, there needs to be some form of template that everyone's following. Otherwise you get a Barbarians team, and we've seen Barbarians games where they've been successful. A lot of the time, they get lost because there's so many different ways in thinking of doing the game. So I think one of Ireland's real strengths is actually the cohesion and confidence they have from everyone being on the same page. So it's important to use James in that way. He has to be on the same page, but also bring that little bit of something different that perhaps other players don't have.
and then further down the line, because the players like James won't be available for us for a while now when it's gone to 5 years, and you're lucky enough to pick up Mac Hansen through his mother's connections. Is there something that can be put to root for further down the line about targeting different populations in Ireland? You know, the way France have all of their players are coming from all over the place. Could you suggest something that Ireland can tap into unresolved or?
Not really. No, I mean, I don't think Ireland need to scour other countries to look for talent. You know, I think the talent that Ireland have. You know, if I'm talking about like a Jimmy O'Brien or Hugo Keenan or Jordan Lama or guys like that, you know, they can all do something different, and they can all be effective top end international players. You know, there's more than enough. It's just making sure you give them enough framework to be able to play within, you know, the game plan that you've designed, but enough flexibility within that. I think Ireland are demonstrating that, you know, pretty well on their own, to be honest.